Assalamu alaikum and peace. Welcome back. Another broadcast of MABIA, Muslim and Black in America. I'm your host, Bilal Abdullah. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Tsunami Slim. If you want to leave a comment, like, subscribe, share, it would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure we've all heard about the move Jay-Z did recently with the NFL. And it don't look too good. His explanation wasn't good either. If he's willing to sell out his own peers, then you think he really cares about you? No, he doesn't. People will say, "Oh, well, he's done a lot of good stuff for black people." That's nice and all, but we're off that credit stuff. The devil would do nice things for you to try to come collect later. Because you know why? And this is what I'm getting to. Nowadays, people will build up all this credit with us, the foundational blacks, only to go sell it off to the highest white supremacist bidder. And this is basically what Jay-Z did. So we're off that credit stuff. What we're on now is, what have you done for me lately? And let's say you haven't done anything for me lately. Okay. We'll give you the credit of the past as long as, even if you haven't done anything lately, at the very least, you don't mess up that credit by doing some lame stuff, by tarnishing it. Now look, I'm not the smartest individual in the world and I can't see the future, but I judge on the apparent. And I judge on the moves you've been making. Umar al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "When the prophet was alive, people would get judged by revelation. But now that the prophet is gone, we judge you by what you show us. So if you show us good, then we will think good of you. It is not on us to judge your inner secrets. Allah will judge you for that. And if you show us evil, we will think evil of you, even if you say that your intentions are good." And this is a authentic narration authenticated by Bukhari. And Jay has always sold out his homies, so we see the evidence. He's always sold out his homies and peers. So the good he's done has been eclipsed. But I will say this. If I turn out to be wrong about this whole NFL entertainment plantation jubilee stuff he's doing, I'll admit I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening. But if I am wrong, I will admit, and I have no problem with that. But the funny thing is, though, he's praising how they're going to use this deal for social justice initiative. Listen to the buzzwords: social justice initiatives, criminal reform, police relationship building, or whatever. All that police relationship building stuff is just basically, we're going to give more money to the police to harm us. But all that bullcrap, this politicians, how politicians say to us black people, it's the same thing. It's like the politicians come to us to get their vote, and all of that money and attention goes to everyone but black people. So he's praising all this stuff. And then just recently, one of the players for the Dolphins had some words to say about about Jay and what he did. And you know what happened? During the practice, the coach played 8 Jay-Z songs back to back to back to back to back as a way to mock the player who spoke out. So we see now these white supremacists and their flunkies are weaponizing Jay-Z. They're weaponizing Jay-Z in this deal he did to keep their niggers in line and to laugh and mock at them. So what did Jay accomplish? He accomplished money in his pocket. He accomplished joining team white supremacy and showing his hand for those who have eyes to see. Those who just want to meat ride, they won't see it. Those who just want to, eat on the planners, they won't see it. And they'll just continue to make excuses. But what's crazy is, this type of stuff Jay-Z does is reminds me of Hamza Useless. It reminds me of many of the so-called American Muslim leaders. Not all of them, make it be clear, not all of them, but a good handful. A lot of them who were once staunch speakers against the oppressions of America, who exposed the hidden satanic hands behind the governments of the world. Now they use all that build up credit with blacks in the Muslim community and black Muslims to, they went ahead and cashed it in at the right moment to white supremacy. Look at Jay. He allegedly did all these nice things here and there for black folk, but then he turns around and cashes it in to be a mascot for white supremacy. And, he's basically letting us know he joined their team. Even Dame Dash in his latest interview with No Jumper exposed him on that too, by calling him basically a house slave. Recently there was an opinion piece that came out in Al Jazeera that was shared with me, and it was this opinion piece was written by Ali Arian, and it was speaking on the political impotence of Muslim leaders in America. And it's a very
Abu Huraira reported, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Years of treachery will come over people in which liars are believed and the truthful are denied. The deceitful are trusted and the trustworthy are considered traitors, and the disgraceful will deliver speeches." It was said, "Who are the disgraceful?" The Prophet said, "Petty men with authority over the common people." This hadith is in Ibn Majah, and it is graded authentic by Albani. And this is what we see, not only with this whole Jay-Z thing going on, but we see it in our community. And this lets me know, this opened my eyes that there is an agenda going on. And it is an agenda that has been going on for years now. It's the get down with team white supremacy and you'll be protected agenda. But that agenda never works as they want it to. These people are calling you to that, but it never works out how they want it to work out. Because white supremacy will see that you are a traitor to your own people, to your own religion. So they will use you, but eventually they will not even trust you anymore, and they'll cast you to the side as well. So joining them is no protection at all. There is no protection except from Allah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no protection except from Allah, and from what you have, and from what Allah has given you to protect yourself. This is why I say we're all we got. And this is why we have to look out for each other under this system of white supremacy. The other option is to speak out against it and to teach who you can about it. The other option is black empowerment in all its aspects. This will lead to action on our part, but us speaking out and teaching also brings about action and propaganda on their part as well. And this is what I was talking about in regards to that Philly standoff that went down. I said that this would be used as propaganda against us. I was saying how the grassroots, the American descendants of slaves, the foundational Black American movement is gaining ground and causing a disruption in the system. And this is a good thing. But now they will start to use their machine to create a reason to come after us, to create a reason to criminalize foundational blacks. And now, as it turns out, this shooter, as I suspected, he was an informant. And someone brought it to my attention that this story is very similar to another case about a brother named Larry Davis, who later became Muslim in prison. You could look that case up and you will see the similarities. Just something to throw out there, something for you to research. But back to this case. Like I said, this whole thing is going to be used to push the whole black identity extremist agenda of how the grassroots movements is about attacking the police. They want to push that agenda and tying that into the ADOS movement and criminalizing them via such means, via such ways. And I believe that my theory is holding true because 2 to 3 days before this situation went down in Philly, we had the Attorney General William P. Barr delivering a speech at the Grand Lodge Fraternal Order of Police National Conference. Pretty much he was preconditioning the minds of the police forces in America to tie the ADOS movement in with attacks on police and domestic terrorism and whatnot. And whenever you hear that Grand Lodge and you hearing fraternal order, just know that's some secret society stuff. But so after he, gives his speech, then days later we had this shooting. And seeing how the guy was an informant, this could have all been staged, because you got people out there who, there were some videos on Twitter where it looked like they were running to the car. The police who were allegedly being shot at, they were running to the car and they were pouring blood on their arms and on their hands. And if somebody's letting off a chopper, they letting off them chopsticks, you not gonna get grazed, bro. You gonna get murked. You gonna get an arm blown off. That's why it's called a chopper, because it's gonna chop something off. But so we see the guy was an informant, and this all could have been staged to coincide with the speech, so that the people could say, "See, this Attorney General William was right." But it is as Allah says, and I say this verse regularly because this is how they really are. Allah says about them that they claim to be the peacemakers, when in fact they are the mischief maker. Allah says in the Quran, "Don't make mischief on the earth." And they say, "Oh, we're not doing that. We're just peacemakers." But then Allah says, "No, they're really the mischief makers, but they don't even realize it." And this is in chapter 2 of the Quran, verses 11 through 12. So let's go over this speech by William Peabody. Let's go over this speech, and let's see how it ties into the things I'm saying, shall we? So he starts out this speech, William Peabody. He starts out this speech where he starts off talking about Jeffrey Epstein and how they're gonna lock him up and how they're gonna do so much work on him. It sounds good, but whatever. But then he goes into basically meat rotting the police. Basically praising them and telling them how hard their job is, and telling them how President Trump supports them and things of this nature. A policeman's job is hard, especially if you're an upright policeman. You have to deal with the white supremacist system behind the police force. But yeah, so he's talking about these different things. Your family spend anxious nights so we can sleep in peace. You never know what your day may bring, what uncertainty, danger, or threat you might face. But you still get up, put on your uniform and badge, kiss your loved ones, and head out to face whatever risk might come your way. He tried to make it seem like these dudes are some daggone, they about to go into Afghanistan. They about to go fight ISIS or something. Like, he trying to make it seem like they really out here. It's a hard job, but come on, dog. People more scared of the police than the police scared of the people. And see, he does try to tie it in, because then he goes on, "This calls for a special kind of bravery. I remember when our troops went off to war in the first Gulf War. They were cheered along the highways as they went. And when they returned in victory, they were cheered and given ticket tape parades. And rightly so." Yeah, but now nobody cares about the victims. Now nobody cares about the Vietnam vets and, Gulf War vets. Nobody cares about the vets no more. So he's doing all of this coddling and schmeat riding and, shining of knobs. He's doing all of this stuff to take it on, and then to say how we need to support them more. They're not getting enough support. So he does all of this, and then he brings up the El Paso and Dayton, Ohio shootings, and he talks about how these things are domestic terrorism. And he's correct about that. These mass shootings are domestic terrorism, but like I said, they're trying to tie the ADOS. They're trying to tie the grassroots movement. They're trying to tie anti-establishment talk or truth to power talk, black empowerment talk. They're trying to tie all of that into domestic terrorism. So he first starts off with talking about the El Paso and Dayton shootings, but then as he goes on in his speech, he starts saying, he starts to twist your mind. So he says, the recent atrocities also remind us of a basic truth. Human beings are capable of great good, but also of the basest evil. Even in a healthy society, violence, lawlessness, and, predation lie just below the surface. In the final analysis, what stands between chaos and carnage on the one hand and the civilized and tranquil society we all yearn for is the thin blue line of law enforcement. You are the ones manning the ramparts day in and day out. So he's getting their minds ready for what's coming. He's getting ready to tie us into what these white folk did, what these white supremacists did. Because here it comes in the middle of his speech. He starts the finagle. He starts the 52 fake out. He says, despite the fact that the majority of American people do support the police, unfortunately, over the past few years, there has been an increasingly vocal minority that regularly attacks the police and advances a narrative that it is the police that are the bad guys rather than the criminals. See? Who is he talking about here? Who is he talking about, this vocal minority? He's talking about you and me. He's talking about black people. He's talking about American descendants of slaves and foundational black Americans who are tired of being oppressed by race soldiers amongst the police department. They're tired of being killed. They're tired of being sexually assaulted, and they're speaking out against it. That's this vocal minority he's talking about. So he's trying to say, because you niggers don't want to get killed by the police and you're talking out against it, then you're wrong for that. Just like I was saying earlier, how these Muslim leaders are trying to flip it back on us and say, no, you're wrong for calling out our wrong. He's saying it here. That's what I'm saying. It's a propaganda, people. It's the same thing. So now he's trying to say these vocal minority who are speaking out against these police killings and these police oppressions by these race soldiers, they're in the wrong. They're a vocal minority. But see, he's making false statements here, because no, the problem that we have is the white supremacy behind and controlling the police forces. The problem we have is that white supremacy is allowing these race soldiers onto the force, on the police force, and they're going out and killing people. These aren't police officers, these are race soldiers. That's the problem we have. So when you're trying to say that we're trying to advance a narrative that it is the police who are bad guys rather than the criminals, no, we know there are criminals out there and we want the criminals locked up. So if a race soldier is being a criminal, we want him locked up too. You see how he's playing with the mind? And so he goes on to say, wherever there is a confrontation involving the use of police force, they automatically start screaming for the officer's scalps regardless of the facts. This isn't true either. When we see the facts, we start talking the facts. Let's not play that game. And then he does that liberal stuff. Oh, I'm not suggesting there are never abuses. As with all human institutions, there are sometimes bad apples. You see how he's playing that game? There are sometimes bad apples, and we will deal with that. When are you going to deal with that? Because every time some bad apple pops out, he just gets fired, and then he'll go to a different state or different city and get rehired. He'll get suspended for a little while with pay. He might be on probation for a little bit. They never get put in jail. They never get even tried in most cases. So when are you going to deal with that? You see how he just throws it off to the side real quick? But these are very much the exceptions, not the rule. Well, actually, it's not. If you do your research, you will see how black people are constantly, constantly racial profiled by police. And this is where a lot of the problems begin to happen. So, there's many studies on this. There's data that indicate Africans Americans are disproportionately stopped more than other races. Um, the whole stop and frisk in New York, there's studies that show that black African Americans are constantly the ones who are being targeted for this stop and frisk, and that's where you get a lot of other problems. A study of over 100 million traffic stops demonstrate that blacks are more likely to be targeted. It's it's us who's being targeted. So to say that it's some minor thing is not true at all. When you have the FBI telling us that white supremacists have infiltrated the police force, that's a problem. That's not something small. That means we're going to be targeted even more. If you're going to do something about it, then how come the same problem is still going on? We've been having the same problem of police brutality targeted against black people since the Black Panthers. And it's still going on today. So you're not dealing with the problem. You're letting it continue, you're letting it fester, and you're letting it get bigger. So he goes on to say the anti-police narrative is fanning disrespect for the law. In recent years, we have witnessed increased toleration of the notion that it's somehow okay to resist the police. So now what he's going to turn this into is that all you Negroes, you need to be slaves. You need to never say nothing about nothing. Just bow your head and take the oppression. Previously, here he goes again. Previously, it was well understood that regardless of the circumstances, physical resistance is unacceptable because it necessarily leads to a spiral of escalating violence that endangers the safety of the officer, the suspect, and all in the vicinity. For that reason, virtually all jurisdictions have made resistance a serious crime. Not too long ago, influential public voices, whether in the media or among community and civic leaders, stressed the need to comply with police commands, even if one thinks they are unjust. Comply first, and if you think you have been wrong, complain later. What he says right here, not long ago, influential public voices, whether in the media or among community and civic leaders. He's talking about the House Negroes. He's talking about the Al Sharptons. He's talking about people like that who tell you to calm down. Just do what they say, baby. He's talking about people like that. And he goes on. But we don't hear this much anymore. What he's talking about is now that you're hearing the voices of the ADOS movement getting louder above these Al Sharptons, above these House Negroes, above these Imam Zayd slackers, above these Hamza uselesses. You're hearing the voices of the grassroots movements of the people of America who are tired of being oppressed by the police force. These are the voices that are growing loudly. So he's mad because these voices are being drowned out by the voices of the grassroots. So he says, but we don't hear this much anymore. Instead, when an incident escalates due to a suspect's violent resistance to police, the fact is usually ignored by the commentary. The officer's every action is dissected, but the suspect's resistance and the danger is posed frequently without mention. No, this is not true. And then you try to act like every time somebody gets shot or hurt or harmed or sexually assaulted or something by the police, it's the person's fault. It's not. There are many cases, like I said before, where the people totally comply and then they still get knocked upside their head. So what are you talking about? We need to get back to basics. This is what he said. We need to get back to basics. We know what the basics are. Is beating up Negroes. That's what the basics are. Not taking it anymore. We don't care. We're just going to get back to the basics. Basics of slavery. That's what it is. We need public voices in the media and elsewhere to underscore the need to comply first and, if warranted, complain later. So now he needs all his House Negroes. He needs all his Team White Supremacy members to start telling you comply with the police, to start supporting the Blue Lives Matter. And this is what we see Imam Zaid Shaker doing. Imam Zaid Slacker did some type of response towards Ali's opinion piece recently that he did. And Imam Zaid Shaker did a response to it, and he's talking about how I never said I support Blue Lives Matter. He's trying to imply that he never supported Blue Lives Matter, but this is all tying in. Like I said, they want us all to be on team white supremacy and you'll be all right. So Imam Zaid Slacker is trying to tell us that if we just comply, that everything will be all right. He says in his response to Ali that, well, I never said I supported Blue Lives Matter, but yes, you did, Imam Zaid. You did. Because we have evidence, and I might post a picture in here. There's evidence of you writing old things on your Facebook post where at the end you have posts like, hold on, let me look. Yeah, at the end, you have, at the end, you have things that you wrote on your Facebook page, and then at the end you have things like police lives matter, hashtag police lives matter, hashtag blue lives matter. Come on. If you're not a supporter, then why are you a supporter? Which one is it, bruh? So this is all tying in together. So William Peabody, P-Bar, he says we need to get back to the basics. We know what the basics are. And he says, everybody needs to comply first. This will make everybody safe, the police, suspects, and the community at large. And those who resist must be prosecuted for that crime. We must have zero tolerance for resisting police. This will save lives. So basically he's saying, if somebody's doing you dirty, you know, and I understand, man. I understand to a certain extent, a black person living in America, you do have to comply to a certain degree. Because you are a prisoner of war of white supremacy. So you do have to comply to a certain degree. I understand that. But even when you do comply, people are still being killed by the police. So at some point, you have to take decisions into your own hands. At some point, when you realize that this alleged officer is actually a race soldier who's trying to take your life, aren't you supposed to defend yourself? Aren't you supposed to try to get away from the threat? So what do you mean? And I remember on Twitter some time back, there was a video of some kids in New York or people in New York throwing water all on the police and throwing water bottles at them. And I quoted that tweet and I said, this is scaring them. Because there was a whole bunch of black people doing that, throwing water, squirting water on them, throwing water bottles. I said, this is going to scare them because those water bottles could easily be anything else. And this scares them because it's showing that they're not afraid anymore. They're losing their fear. And this is what this whole speech is about. When he says we need to get back to basics, he's saying we need to get back to putting fear into the heart of these niggers. That's what he's saying. So when I saw that, I said, wait a minute. Yeah, this ain't going to roll good. They're not going to like this. And he mentions it here. He says, where does he say? He says here, we are seeing disrespect for law enforcement in other ways. We were all nauseated by the spectacle of prancing punks. Who was he talking about? He's talking about Negroes, of prancing punks pelting New York police officers with water in plastic buckets. Unfortunately, these were not isolated events. So he's talking about you. He's saying you niggers are getting too uppity, and we're not liking that. And then he goes on to talk about how he's even getting tired of these woke district attorneys who are self-styled social justice reformers who spend their time undercutting the police, letting criminals off the hook, and refusing to enforce the law. No, some of these people, they actually want justice, and they're seeing that the system is being unjust to them. So they're trying to get justice for their client. That's what they're doing. He's having a problem with that. He's like, dang, not only are y'all standing up against the police now you got the people inside the courtroom helping them out to get off for standing up against the police. We can't have this. We need niggas in jail. We need to keep this prison industrial complex going. How are we going to keep these slavery going if y'all going to let them off the hook too? If we can't kill them because they're resisting, if we can't lock them up because of you DAs letting them off the hook, what are we going to do? They're getting afraid and their fear is coming out, but they have to mask their fear in saying that it's a fear for everybody. Oh my God, if you don't get these niggers under control, that's what he's saying. And he's talking about how, certain crimes aren't being prosecuted anymore. He says, once in office, they have been announcing their refusal to enforce broad swaths of criminal law. Most disturbing is that some are refusing to prosecute cases of resisting police. Oh my God. Some are refusing to prosecute various theft cases or drug cases, even where the suspect is involved in distribution. You mean non-violent crimes. See, what the problem is that they're saying, what he's saying really is that we can't lie anymore because violent crime is going down. So what he's saying is, if you're not going to prosecute these crimes, we can't use these numbers where you already targeting black people and you're already targeting black people for prosecution, because a lot of these white folk who do crimes, they get off. They don't get prosecuted. They get arrested, but they don't get prosecuted. And that's why the numbers look crazy. So what he's saying is, if you're not going to prosecute these people, the numbers is going to look bad because they're going to be so low. And so now we can't use these numbers as an excuse for police brutality. We can't use these numbers as an excuse for these race soldiers to go out and kill you. We can't make black people look like criminals anymore. So we need y'all to get these numbers up. That's what he's saying. And so he says he'd like to see a greater support for the police. So that's why you see Tommy Lauren come out later and tweet about how she's supportive of Blue Lives Matters, and if you have a problem with it, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And so William P-Bar, he goes on to say the thin blue line is getting thinner. The number of sworn officers per capita has been dropping. We are now in a full employment economy with lucrative and safer jobs now available in other sectors. Police departments must compete hard to attract the best candidates. So what he's saying is, people don't want to be police. You know why people don't want to be police? Because they know that once you get into that, you're behind the blue line. You're in a secret society now. And if you already got to comply when you're outside of the blue line. You already got to comply or you're going to get killed. And even if you do comply, you still might get killed. So even when you're outside the blue line, you still have to comply. So what's it going to be like when I get inside the blue line? And I see all this racism and white supremacy going on within the whole police force and department all across America, and I want to speak out against it. What's going to happen then? Heck, nah, I don't want to join y'all. Because now, when I go out in the streets, I got to prove to this other white officer who's in the car with me that I'm really down for the blue lives. So when I see this white officer punch a black guy in the face, like they did in, New Orleans just recently, they ran up on people's doors talking about we're checking for gang members. Some lie they made up to get black people out of their homes, and then some race soldier comes up and punches a innocent black guy in the face. He was complying. What happened? I thought if we comply, nothing happens. So he punches him in the face. So all his Blue Lives Matter buddies, all his police officers didn't say nothing to him, because you know why? We're all behind the blue line. We're all brothers here. Don't nobody want to be a part of that. People become like righteous people who become police. They become police because they want to change their communities for the better. But once they get involved in it, they see I can't do a damn thing because I'm a part of a system of white supremacy. And this white supremacy is controlling the police department. So I really can't make a change in my community. That's the problem. That's why people don't want to be police officers anymore, because they're seeing that there's no point to doing it. All you have become is a soldier for white supremacy, for the most part. And there's some good officers out there, but once you cross that blue line, you still have to stick up for the bad officers. You have to make excuses for the bad officers. So it's not acceptable for people to do it, and that's why they don't want to be police. And he proves my point that the police are just an arm of the white supremacist government, because he says the very reason we have government is to protect the public safety. The very first duty of government is to provide the police. So he's proving my point. So he goes on to talk about he goes on to talk about the opioid crisis, and how we need to get that under control, and blah 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 blah. But this is proving my point. This ties back into, like I was saying, Zaid Slacker, how he was saying in response to Ali's opinion piece. Again, we have these house Muslims parroting the same things that William is saying, because in Imam Zaid Slacker's response, he basically said the same words that William Peabody was saying. He was saying, oh, I know it's some bad apples, and yeah, but you still gotta, he was doing the same gymnastics. Oh, their job is hard. Oh, you just have to comply. And like I said, I understand to a certain extent you have to comply because we're behind enemy lines. But we also see time and time again how these race soldiers amongst the police take their power way too far and harm, attack, kill, sexually assault our people. This is totally unacceptable. And to say black people should just comply with things like that is putting us back into the state of basically slavery. And this is what these house Muslims are pushing us to. This is what folks like William Peabody want us to be. They want us to be slaves again. And they want us to believe that if we just be good silent niggers of white supremacy, we will be protected and everything will be all right. Even though we have countless evidence that even when we do comply, we still have problems. And this is why I have a problem with what Imam Zaid Slacker, what Hamza useless, what the other guy Ali Hamid, whatever his name is. But I did the broadcast about him some time back. This is why I have a problem with the Zaytuna Institute and people like them, because they are pushing us to become submissive, not to Allah. They're pushing us to become submissive to white supremacy because they think that's going to protect us somehow, and it's not. And then Imam Zaid Shaker tries to use the whole, well, we ride with the Republicans because they're conservative and they're about, family, and they're against abortion and they're against sexual LGBT movement and all of that. No, you're riding with them because you want some biscuits from them. You want some buttermilk, butter biscuits, samosas from them. That's why you're riding with them. You want to be protected by them because you think if you're on their team, they're not going to harm you. But you're going to get your wake-up call. That's what's going to happen. And then you're going to try to run back to the Muslim community. You're going to try to run back to the black community and hope that they have their arms open for you. It won't happen. And this is what we see going on all around the globe now. People are getting tired of their oppressive governments, and they start speaking out at first, and then they get arrested, they get killed for it. And now you even have people out in the streets and where was it? Over in the Asian countries, they're over there cutting down towers that have, the little cameras in it because they're tired of being watched by their government. So it's just a lot going on in the world. So we have these issues going across all over the world, and we have to be careful about these house Muslims and house Negroes who are trying to push us into submitting to being oppressed. You can't sit up here and say that somebody is accusing you, Imam Zaid Slacker, that somebody is accusing you of supporting Blue Lives Matter. You're trying to imply that you don't, but you do. That's that political talk. Don't do that to us, because we're not falling for that. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said some people's speech is like magic, because they're so good with words that they can just manipulate your mind. And this is how Imam Zay Slacker is. He's good with his words, and if you read it, you would think that he's saying I don't support Blue Lives Matter, but once you go back and look, you'll see that actually he does. He's posting hashtags saying Blue Lives Matter. So which one is it? But that's all I wanted to say, people, man. It's getting crazy out here. You can see how they're trying to tie the grassroots movements. They're trying to tie foundational Black Americans into terrorism. They want to tie us into Black identity extremists, so that way they can criminalize us, attack us, kill us, and do what they want to do to protect their white supremacist system, because they're being exposed. They're getting tired of our voices getting louder and louder, demanding reparations, demanding that the foot of white supremacy not only be taken off of our necks, but that the foot be broken and the whole body of white supremacy be thrown into the fire. They're getting tired of us speaking up against it. But we're not going to stop. We're going to keep speaking up against it, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has also told us that if you see a wrong, change it with your hand. And if you can't change it with your hand, then change it with your tongue. And if you can't change it with your tongue, then hate it in your heart. And hating it in your heart is the weakest of faith. So if the least we can do is speak out against these oppressions, then we need to continue to speak out and not be afraid to speak truth to power. But thank you for tuning into this broadcast. Again, this is MABIA, Muslim and Black in America. I'm your host, Bilal Abdullah. Until next time, peace and assalamu alaikum.